Welcome to the Intentionists podcast, where we explore the interplay between intuition, spiritual health, and everything in between. I'm your host, Amy Schreiber.
And I'm Hillary Zwallen. Our intention is to create a dialogue that inspires you to consciously forge your path with curiosity and compassion for life and its mysteries.
Before we start our episode today, just a little heads up, we will be covering some adult topics, so if you would like to put your headphones in, stick them in now. Today we are talking about sex, Tantric Yoga, and harnessing masculine and feminine energy with Lela Weinert. Lela is an author, speaker, and coach who helps women increase health and beauty in their lives by offering them tools and support that are unique to their own personal path in womanhood. She coaches privately in groups and offers workshops on a variety of topics that pertain to physical, intellectual, and spiritual nourishment. After finishing a professional ballroom dance career, Lela began working as a stylist and makeup artist in New York City. Her success kept her traveling throughout the United States and eventually landed her in Los Angeles, California, where she became a licensed beautician. She completed her professional certification in health coaching and went back to school and completed her bachelor's from the University of Utah. She's been a student of Tantra in Thailand and Denmark and is in the process of designing her own ballroom curriculum for implementing these tools of ancient wisdom in competitive partnerships and relationships. Through an eclectic background of education, art, travel, and living each day as a modern woman, Lela has developed a system for self-improvement that focuses on the areas of a woman's life that create a ripple effect on all the others. They are the fundamental elements that health, beauty, success, and happiness spring from. Her book, Shopping Through Womanhood, An Intuitive Approach to Health, Beauty, and Shoes, is a journey through spirituality and wellness through the analogy of a shopping trip. Lela takes you on a journey into the depths of your wardrobe, or your inner spiritual world, where you will discover items you have never worn, realize what you need, and let go of what you don't. You can purchase her book on Amazon or connect with Lela by visiting her website, lelaweinert.com, LeaWeinert, and Lela Weinert on Instagram or Facebook. Now on with the show.
Lela, thank you for joining with me today. I wanted, before we dive into Tantra and all the awesome things you're doing, your book that you've written, I wanted to start off by having you give our listeners just a quick summary of your life so that we know kind of who you are, where you came from, and how you got here.
Well, thank you for having me. This is always the hardest question for me to summarize my life. It's quite an eclectic life, I think, so far. So I grew up kind of moving around a lot with my family. I'm one of 6 kids, so I have a big family. And I grew up a ballet dancer, and then later I transitioned into what I really fell in love with, which was partner dancing, ballroom dancing. And I had a professional career in that. And I ended that quite early in terms of like my performing and competing career, and ended up teaching a lot. But I fell into a lot of other things after that point. I went back to school and I got my Bachelor of Science in Communication, and I became a certified health coach. I ran a beauty business for a few years. I kind of had my hands in a bunch of different things. And honestly, I kept searching and it wouldn't be really what fit. And so I'd go, no, and I'd find something else. And they kind of all related because they were all, you could say, in the health and wellness industry.
And arts-based, yes.
Yes, and definitely creative-based. I've tried not being so creative. It didn't work out. Super unhappy. That's always going to be a part of any project I do. But I wasn't quite following, I guess you could say, my truth or my dharma or purpose, calling, whatever you want to call it. So with all the effort I was putting into all of these things, I actually burned myself out. Mm-hmm. And what enabled me to kind of slow down enough to really get in tune with my heart and what I really wanted to do, in order to get to that point, I actually got super sick.
Yeah, your body sometimes will jump in and say, no,
yeah, I was
enough.
like, you're done. Because I was kind of in that rat race I think a lot of us find ourselves in terms of just kind of going. And you're like, okay, well, after I do this, this, and this, then I'll be able to relax. Or after I do whatever it is, then I'll be able to love myself enough to really be in line with what I'm supposed to do. So this kind of, I talk about it in my book. It's an if-then pattern. If I do this, then I will be able to be happy. Or if I do this, then I can love myself. If I do, then I get a reward, which is something we're taught a lot in our society from a very young age. If you study and you get a good grade, then you're rewarded as being, worthy. And
then you're good enough.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And so I ended up in Thailand and really kind of found myself there, which found myself. It's a constant discovery, but I think I'm on a good path of discovery at this point. So,
well, and just so our listeners know, Lela and I have been friends for 15 years or longer, maybe. We actually met each other back when you were like a baby in the dance program at BYU, and I was like getting ready to graduate.
Yep.
And then we became really good friends when we both found ourselves in Los Angeles a few years later, bonding over a lot of random dudes.
Yeah.
Bonding over guys, bonding over dance. We were neighbors. We happened to live on the same block in West Hollywood. So we go a long way. So it's fun to hear you retrace those steps. And it's true, right? You were kind of in lots of different directions.
Yeah.
So now you're in Thailand, or you're not in Thailand right this minute, but let's say a year ago, you find yourself in Thailand.
I pretty much spent half of last year there. Yeah.
Yeah. And I remember having the conversation. We had this great conversation after you came home, and you just sounded so much lighter, and you were so excited about everything that you were learning there. And I've been into yoga for years, but Tantra I think there's a lot of misconceptions around Tantra. When I think of Tantra, I think of Couples Retreat, that movie. And then there's like the kind of the yogi guy that's in like the Speedo that's boom, he's like, and you think of like all these people feeling super awkward in class and it being very sexual. So let's debunk some of that, Lela. Tell me about like, what is Tantric Yoga? What did you practice? Give our listeners a quick summary of that, if you would.
So
Tantra for Dummies.
Well, first of all, Tantra and yoga are not, they're actually a separate thing. Yoga is a tool that is used in Tantra to evolve spiritually and transform. And the yoga that I learned in Thailand, and I'm continuing to learn and practice daily, is very different from yoga in the US. I kind of joke with some of my friends. I'm like, yeah, it lifts your consciousness up instead of your butt, because it's not so much a workout, but a spiritual practice. So it's done with your eyes closed. It's done much more with a focus inward on your whole system of your being. And it's not about the Lululemon pants so much, but Tantra is a spiritual practice. So it's a path of spirituality. So ideally it leads towards enlightenment, or, discovering and actualizing your supreme self. So Tantra uses yoga, uses meditation.
How does it use the yoga? Is it just that the yoga is like, it's the practice, the poses are the way to clear the mind? Or what do you mean when you say Tantra uses yoga?
So it uses Hatha yoga, and there's many different types of yoga, but Hatha yoga is mainly what's used to balance the right and left side of the body. So we have, and this is really interesting to me because you get into the whole masculine and feminine aspects of our being and how they balance out, which is something that we all are constantly striving to do. So the yin and yang, we have a receptive side, the feminine side, we have a more emissive side, the dynamizing side, the yang side, which is the masculine side. And Hatha balances these. And so when you start to balance these frequencies on different levels of your being through asanas, through postures, what happens is you basically, it's like fine tuning. It's if you had a radio and you kind of fine tune the signal to become clearer and clearer and clearer, then you can hear better. right? So that's just an example. But basically, if you have, let's say, self-doubt or fear or anything pertaining to, like, that's all ego-based, doing certain asanas will actually help rid yourself of some of those. It basically helps you to resonate at a higher level, at a balanced level. And
Sure.
And for example, the heart, which is, I think that's the center of Tantra in a way, because it's the center of our being. And there's a lot of work that's done on the heart. And that's, I think, what I love about Tantra is it's so heart-centered. Mm-hmm. And a lot of yoga does resonate at the heart, or does focus on the heart. I mean, if you look at the prayer pose, your hands are held at your heart. That is the center. And I think that a lot of yoga has been kind of diluted as it's transferred from hands to hands, into wherever.
So you're more of a purist when you say, like, I would say on the Intentionists, in terms of yoga and all of that, like you say, there's lots of different paths. And I think it's a little bit dangerous to get into the, like I've been in a lot of yoga classes here in my little Modesto town, vinyasa flows that have been incredibly spiritual. And I felt like, I'm in camel, or I'm in in half pigeon or something. And I'm like crying because I'm like releasing something that I don't even know what it is, Yeah. So, I mean, of course, but I get what you're saying when you're talking, like, there is also a counterculture that is very materialistic in yoga. But I think a lot of yogis, there is that tension of kind of the yoga purist, the yoga spirit as a spiritual practice, and then kind of the yoga that's like yoga lattes, kind of like switching it into like full workout, right?
Any yoga practice, if someone walks into any yoga school in the world, their intentions are to better themselves. So any yoga means union with yourself, union with the world, union with the universe, with God, with whatever you believe in, but union, to be less separated. So basically, union brings you closer to your soul. Separateness takes you more to your ego. So the intention of going to a yoga class of any kind is still going to better your life. I mean, this podcast is the Intentionists, so intention is super, super powerful. What I love about the school that I am involved in now is that there's just so much information and tools and techniques that really, it's an ongoing course that continues for years and years. So it's almost like studying in a university. If you were to compare it to something.
Yeah. When we were talking earlier, you were saying, because you're in the process of training now to become, or to eventually become a teacher, but you were saying it's like you have to write a thesis. It's like a 4-year program. I mean, that's unheard of. It's usually like a 200-hour, which is still pretty rigorous. I mean, that 200 hours is a lot of hours to be in the studio, or 500 hours. But I mean, you'll have well over 1,000 hours, it sounds like, by the time you're done writing the thesis, and you will have studied all over the world. So, I mean, there is obviously a level of commitment to embodying these principles from your end. Now, the question I have though is, so I get that Tantra is now heart focused, but how would going to a Tantra class be different than, let's say, a vinyasa flow or a Kundalini or Bikram, like for people that are trying to understand, to relate it? How is it different?
So when I went into my first class in Thailand, I just found this yoga school and I was like, yeah, I think I should go take a class there. And I go in and the class begins, and it begins like most yoga classes where you just center in your heart and you kind of clear your thoughts, and little kind of arrival exercise, I guess you could call it, little mini meditation. And then they started the asanas, and the whole class is with the eyes closed, which was different than most yoga classes for me, at least ones that I have attended in the US. And so much emphasis put on the energy flow. Instead of actually moving, the more still you are, the more you can actually feel your being.
Wow.
So it's kind of the opposite, as opposed to, I mean, I definitely didn't work up a sweat.
Yeah.
But I really got to know myself better. It's something that really, to be honest, it's a very difficult thing to explain. It's much better experienced.
So how does sex fit into Tantra? Right? Like I always think of Tantric Yoga and I'm like, oh, there's a lot of sex going on over there, or it's like for your sex life, or right. So like, how does it fit in? Right. Because I mean, I get the masculine, feminine. Yeah. Is that why it's that way? Or is it actually there's something sexual about it?
So basically Tantra is about taking any experience in life and fully embracing it consciously. Okay. So a lot of religions, a lot of spiritual practices kind of do away with sexuality, for example, because that is in our lower, I mean, if you understand the chakra system of our being, but even if you don't, it's kind of those lower desires, our sexual desires. It's what drives a lot of people to do many things. I mean,
well, and it's also been used by institutions. It's been, it's a way to control people, right? By shaming and by saying, no, turn it off, turn it off.
Yeah. And
right.
It can, if the goal is to, I guess, just feed those desires, then I wouldn't say that's a very, it's not a spiritual aspiration, to just have sex. So Tantra does use lovemaking, but it's in a way where it transforms it. It basically, the whole point is that in Tantra is that you embrace all aspects of your being. So sexuality is a part of it. I think that's one of the most misunderstood parts, because it's really in taking sex. Lovemaking is an experience that can be very intense. And when you take two polar opposites, a man and a woman, you can really produce a lot of energy. So it's really about taking that energy and taking it up into the heart, taking it to higher places. It's about sublimating that energy. So Tantra is about taking, basically, you have energy and consciousness. So if they're talking about the goddess and God Shiva and Shakti is the feminine energy in Tantra. So it's taking an energy, meaning the manifestation of God. So everything in the universe is basically Shakti, the feminine. Right. All creation, the nature, our bodies. Yeah. Exactly. Our bodies are 70% water, and water is the feminine, it's so Shakti is basically, it's in everything. It's why women are usually very dynamic. We talk a lot. We produce a lot of energy. We accumulate a lot. And men are usually more.
It's complicated. It's always complicated over here, right? There's hormones, there's mood swings, there's babies, there's periods, there's all kinds of things that go on. Yes.
And then Shiva is what brings lucidity and stillness and consciousness. So, we really balance each other out.
Right. There's beauty in both, and there's a need for both
within us. We have both within us, but being, let's say, I mean, you and I we embody, we're feminine, we're women.
Right.
So it's much easier to walk the path of life, really embracing our femininity. And it's easier for a man, of course, on a physical level, but on all levels, to then embrace masculinity. And so Tantra says, okay, if we have these beings that are just naturally polar opposites, then we can use that to transform spiritually. So it's lovemaking in Tantra is a spiritual practice of using, if you were to say plus and minus, this is one way to look at it in terms of numbers. So if you have plus being the masculine and minus being the feminine, right? And then you have God as 0. So if you have, let's say, +1 and -1, then you can get to 0 because it balances. But Tantra says, okay, let's actually increase the intensity. Let's do +100 and -100. So the pendulum swings much further from yin to yang. Then you can maybe even get to God even faster.
I think everybody that's listening is like, oh, okay. How do we do this? How do we do this? Okay. Yeah. So we all need to go take a Tantra class. So then is it a matter of being, I don't know, like consciously present in the, I think like with sex, it's so complicated, right? Because you think about what any one person brings to that. And then
Well, it's very emotional.
Right.
It's
We've got the emotional thing. We've also got all of the conditioning of our upbringing, whether it was good or bad. There's trauma that can happen. There's so much dialogue about what's okay, what isn't okay. What does the partner that you're experiencing this with want? What do you want? I mean, it's a complicated thing. And so
if we go into the level of the ego, then we get all of that stuff. We get jealousy, we get shame, we get fear, doubt, all of these things that our ego goes crazy whenever we want to change something.
Mm-hmm. Right.
And it's like a bat in a cage. When you really want to transform your life, it says, oh, wait, but you have these limitations. And it does the same thing in relationships. But what if you get hurt? Or what if? There's a lot of what ifs that your ego kind of gets in there and says. And that's what I love about Tantra, is that you surpass the ego. The whole point is to kind of dissipate it, and not to suppress it, but to say, okay, those are feelings that I'm having, but that is my ego. And you know how to actually recognize those things.
Bringing the awareness.
Yeah, and there's a lot of yoga that can actually help heal all of that through doing asanas. But
like
then
what
say, okay,
specifically? Do you know?
Yeah, I mean, that's something that people would have to take a course to really learn. Not something I could teach over a podcast, right, unfortunately.
Yeah, no, totally.
And I'm in the process of doing my own healing and learning about these things and really going, oh, that's not me, that's my ego. And to be able to recognize it, I mean, that's where consciousness comes in, right? Because that's a lot of energy going on. And you bring in the lucidity of saying, oh, I'm aware that actually goes in, let's say, the ego box. That's not my soul. That's not where I really am in line with who I am, because who I am is a being that's actually able to access love anytime, anywhere, all the time, even without an object.
Love that.
And
that's beautiful, Lela.
And so anything having to do with the heart, which is really where we begin our journey in the soul, really has no doubt, no fear. All of that is below that level. So when you start to recognize that, then you can actually say, oh, if I have fear or doubt in my relationship, or jealousy, or any of those things that kind of tend to pop up, especially for women, we tend to be more jealous. We tend to be more attached to the object of our love. Men are a little bit better at being free in that respect. They're naturally more detached, but they have to learn love to be really connected through women. So we have a lot to learn from each other, which is why I really love teaching this in ballroom dancing. Love making is a tricky thing to be like, all right, everybody, this is what we're going to do today. Let's take it all
sex class. Okay. All right, everybody.
Yeah, but you can teach the principles of Tantra, which is really about transfiguring each other so that you look at each other in a divine way. You look at the best parts of each other, and that's what you focus on. You look at each other from a place in the heart, and to polarize with one another, that plus and minus, how far can we get? How masculine can one person get, and how feminine can one person get, to create this charge that we can really ascend with? So that can actually be done, I have found, in ballroom dancing, because you can take anyone into a ballroom dance class and say, okay, we can touch each other, but it's a safe space to touch each other. It's
but hands above the waist, folks.
Exactly.
Dance position. Yeah.
But really to explore these ideas in such a beautiful medium, because it's all about the leader and the follower, the giver and the receiver. You really feel the man. I mean, I'm starting my next book already on this, because the man holds the woman with his right side, which is the masculine side of the body, and receives her with the left side, which is the feminine, receptive side of the body. I mean, whoever created ballroom dance was really intuitive, because it fits so perfectly on a physical level, on an energetic level, the way the spiraling energy works. With the hold for the man, and then with the woman expanding in his frame, because she is the universe. He focuses on her, and she looks up and focuses on God. I mean, it's very it really portrays Tantra
that makes it a little bit more than pertain and rhinestones.
Yeah, it's funny
Good grief.
From, ballroom, where it is actually quite egocentric. It's a competition, and that competition, the literal definition, is separating yourself from others, right? To be the best. That's the highest level we can get in the ego, is to kind of become something that is different. When we get to the soul, it's about seeing yourself in everything and everything in you. And so you really become one with everything. And that's really the goal. So it's interesting to come from the ballroom dance industry, where my focus was always to become the best.
Right. I mean, that's about the most egocentric.
Right. I mean, if you can get the couple to actually compete with other people and not amongst themselves, you're really getting somewhere, because usually it's oftentimes even a competition. Couple competes with one another.
Within, yes, right. That's the hardest part.
And the magic that happens when you take the masculine and feminine energy and really balance it. That's when the magic happens. So
I'm excited for you to reform ballroom, Lela. I'm really excited to see what it's going to look like in 10 years after you get a hold of all the couples.
We'll see. But, people have to want to transform. So with what I'm doing, it's I'm using ballroom as a medium because it's such an easy thing to teach people in.
It's a nice framework, isn't it?
It's a really great framework. Yeah. And it's fun. The divine play, which is the play between Shiva and Shakti, this interaction of these different energies. It's about fun. It's a play. It's not trying. When you're in a relationship and you're really trying, it usually just botches the whole thing. Like when you're putting all that effort in, it's when you take it lightly in a detached way, but in a loving way, where you fall, and like a child falls and they laugh and they get back up. They don't like, oh, I fell, I must be terrible, which is something we really do as adults.
I'm going to hide myself away from intimacy forever.
They're like, oh, that didn't work. Let me try this. And they just get up and they try again. And I think that ballroom provides that kind of, oh, we fell out of balance. Maybe we should try this. And if you treat it kind of like a child, and that's the dance of life. If we could dance through life the way a child falls and gets back up when they fall off balance, the way that ballroom dance can be treated, I think that everything becomes a little bit easier, because we're going to fall no matter what.
Right. Right. I mean, that's just part of it, right?
Yeah. And that's part of Tantra. You embrace, intense experiences to transform. And so you are going to fall, but in a way where you have tools to catch you and understand, to be aware. So,
and this can apply, I mean, just as you're saying that, it's just an allegory for any really relationship, masculine, feminine, even friendships, I think, like you've said, balancing, learning to embrace and balance whatever the opposite energy is that is your dominant energy. If you're, like I've always said, I feel like a very, like I have a lot of masculine energy with all of the motivation that I have in my life. For me, it's been more, I'm a woman and I'm nurturing, but I find I've had to really work on allowing myself to cook and to nest and to really nurture that side of me, because I'm used to I'm the oldest child and I'm out,
Yeah. I think that that's an issue for a lot of women, myself included. There's a lot of pressure for women these days to become things. And not that is bad. I think that if you feel in your heart, I'm going to start a company, then if it's really in line with your soul, you should do that. Absolutely.
Totally.
But I think that women often do it because they feel obligated to, or
they're in a man's world. And so you have to approach the man's world with that masculine energy. Yeah. And it's exciting to think about, what would it be like to start a company and do it in this very feminine way,
Yeah, exactly. Right? It can be done in a feminine way. I would say my biggest advice, and this is something I'm always trying to take myself, is to women out there who are like, how do I, actualize what I'm supposed to do with my life, but do it in a feminine way? Or how do I do this job, but still be in touch with my femininity? And my biggest advice is to relax. this is something that women struggle with the most. I mean, to really be in touch with your heart and to your purest, I would say, aspirations, what you really are enthused by, because enthusiasm comes from the heart. It comes from really being in line with what you're supposed to do. You know, when you go to work and you feel like it's not work, it's a play, it's that divine dance, it's something that's in line with your soul, then you have to be in a relaxed state to recognize it. And I think that's what happened for me in Thailand when I wrote my book, is I finally relaxed. I got there and I slept for probably a week. I was like eating mangoes and getting massages and sleeping and just revitalizing my system, because I was pretty worn out. I didn't even realize how tired I was and tense. And then I got into a space where I actually let go and I started to breathe more and relaxed more. And suddenly I was filled with all this creative power. I mean, I punched out my book faster than I could possibly. I couldn't.
Right. So let's talk about this channeling experience. Like, how long did it take you? So you've written a book. It's called Shopping Through Womanhood, an intuitive approach to health, beauty, and shoes, and which I've read. I think it's great. It's really wonderful. It's like it's kind of a nice how-to guide on how to get back in touch and with yourself and love yourself. And how long did it take you to write this thing?
2.5 months.
Yes. I mean, it's like 200 and how many pages? It's like 200
a little
pages.
Over 200.
A little over 200 pages. It's very well written. And
thank you.
You did it in 2.5 months. I mean, talk about getting in the flow. Let's talk about that for a minute.
Yeah. I mean, the first step, as I said, was that I relaxed. I think that's for any woman who wants to use her creative capacity and really develop and be in line with what she's supposed to do with her life and with her heart, is to relax. And then from there, I started studying yoga and meditation and Tantra. And I felt like I became more in tune with myself, really. I mean, I felt that I had a lot to clean out, actually. And so I think that kind of inspired the whole idea of writing a book that uses the metaphor of a woman's wardrobe and a shopping experience. Because women, we tend to accumulate things, right? We accumulate. You give the man, if you even look at how a woman has a baby, right? The man is involved for really a second in terms of what's needed.
Right,
you know, it's a little impulse.
Yes.
And then what happens is we start accumulating. We absorb that impulse. We accumulate and we create. And for another 9 months, the woman is actually, creating this baby. We manifest amazing things. I mean, that's just an example, an obvious example, I guess you could say. But women, you look at a man's wardrobe and a woman's wardrobe, and it's hilarious. You know right away, that's a man and that's a woman. The number of things in the wardrobe, right? Women have more. We just have so much stuff. And sometimes we get a little lost in, and I would say this is where men help, is we become a little less conscious sometimes of what we're, quote, shopping for. We're like, oh, it's on sale, I'll buy it. But do we really need it? But that's in life.
How do we even really like it? Let's be honest.
Yeah, exactly. Right. Does it really feed our life?
This? It's just on sale. Oh my gosh. Yeah.
Yeah. So in life, how many times do we as women kind of go through and we start adding things to our day, our to-do list? If you look at a man's to-do list and a woman's to-do list, I guarantee you one will be shorter and it's not ours. So we add a lot of things to our life. We do a lot of things. We multitask. And then it's really going, okay, if I look at this as a metaphor of a shopping trip, what do I really need? And my book kind of explores how to discover that and what, so that I'm conscious of what I'm accumulating. Accumulating is great as long as it's nourishing our life and we're prioritizing the right things for us. And then what can I get rid of? So there's kind of towards the end of the book, once you really have what's feeding you, you realize, wow, I don't need so many things that I have. When I got back from Thailand, I walked in my room, and after doing all of this cleansing, of course, not on just a physical level, but an energetic level and spiritually, evolving. And I got back and I walked in my room and I was like, oh my God, how do I have so much stuff? I don't need this. And I just started getting rid of stuff. And so in my book, I go through, using that as a metaphor for cleaning out your life, cleaning out your wardrobe, but also what are the mental cobwebs that we have? What are those
health
things that
and wellness? You talk
debilitate
a lot about
us
diet and,
What are the things that maybe inhibit us from actualizing our potential mentally even? And so meditation and things like that, these are all tools that help to kind of clear out that clutter that we have sometimes. So
I wanted to address too this idea of, we were talking about women needing to relax or, like leaning into their, their creativity in a way that isn't so stressed. But I wanted to speak to the idea that we've been living in a man's world, right? So we've been matching that masculine energy. So for men, and I think that I see this for men too, where I know several men who are trying to be, they're like trying to get more in touch with their feminine side, but we don't have a culture that really allows for that either, right? Like there's this, like we talked about earlier in this episode, just for men, there's such a, they're socialized to be macho and to like not have feelings and to like roll their eyes at silly women. And I think that there's a lot of men who are trying to activate those more quote unquote feminine sides of that.
Absolutely. So we've kind of switched the polarity, meaning that charge, to where the plus is now the minus and the minus is now the plus. And it doesn't work as harmoniously, which is why when I teach like tantric ballroom workshops, it's interesting to see when you have a man that is dancing with a woman. This is just an example, of course, used in dance, but you have a man dancing with a woman, and to really appreciate her for her beauty and to fill up his frame. She doesn't have to have her own frame. He's the frame of the partnership. He's kind of the structure, because men are such a wonderful structure. They're very clear, kind of like the lines in a coloring book, and then the woman comes in and colors it all with all these colors. Alone, the lines are quite boring, right? It's just black and white. And the woman brings in all this life, because that's Shakti, that's the energy, that's the manifestation of all this beauty in the world. And when men start to understand actually the woman's role, they start to really go into their own. This is something that I've actually experimented with recently. When you have a woman who really knows who she is and really has an understanding of what she's worth as a woman, as a Shakti, let's say, then automatically it's quite fascinating to see how men will kind of around her, because she's so strong in her femininity, they will naturally go more into their masculinity. So I think honestly, this might be a bold statement, but I think women could really change everything, because when women know how to really be in their feminine, men don't really have a choice, to be honest. they kind of go into their masculine because it polarizes. So it's like if you're a woman, so let's say you have a man that comes into a room and he's super masculine, right? He's super still. He's super aware. He's really centered in his heart, but he's very, very masculine. It automatically, at least for me and for a lot of women I've talked to, it makes you kind of relax. You feel safe around him. He holds your space in a very safe way. So you automatically become more feminine. So it's really,
You're saying go more extreme. That's interesting.
That's actually what Tantra is about, is to go more extreme.
I think what my point was more like, if you're talking about the self individual, if we're talking about the individual, right? Not necessarily the dynamic of the two people, because
of the couple. Okay.
Right. If let's say we're taking it away from the couple, we're not talking about the dynamic between man, woman relationship. We're just talking about the individual and the idea that we're trying to find a balance. And so what I was speaking to more was, we have men who are socialized to be extremely masculine. And, but what if they have more feminine qualities? And when we kind of say more feminine qualities, meaning like creativity, or there these other ways that are like, those are not as encouraged to foster, So my point is just that, how do we allow men to explore their femininity more? in ways that are where they feel safe, where they don't feel like they have to walk into the room and be this big macho guy, because there's a lot of guys that aren't that way and have maybe been trying to put themselves.
There's a misunderstanding around what masculinity is. I mean,
yeah, so please explain that. That's great.
Because to be masculine doesn't mean that you're macho, and that's actually ego. To be, I am super strong and I can, fight, and to be masculine means to be super, super conscious, super aware. So at least in Tantra, I mean, the goal would be to be very masculine and also very centered in your heart, because everyone, women and men, very centered in the heart. And in that sense, you can be still, you can be listening, you can be a wonderful listener to a woman or to anyone, really. Men tend to be better listeners than the women. I do talk about that in my book as well. Something for us to learn from a little bit. But they can still be creative. They can be anything, really, but they can do it in a masculine way. They can still be conscious. So the masculine is more the bringing in the awareness. You're married. So would you say that your husband, sometimes when you have all these ideas and all of this energy, he sometimes kind of he brings you more aware of kind of the point.
Oh, yeah. I mean, he's for sure
caught up in the details.
For me, he's for sure my grounding force, but that's our dynamic. I would say that I'm flittering around and coming up with all kinds of stuff. And he's like, let's think about that for a minute. He helps me to bring it into reality for sure. For sure. That's our dynamic though. Right. I don't know that that's the way it is for everybody. I sometimes wonder if it can be, can be switched. Sometimes.
But would you say for your husband, for example, he's more lucid and kind of more aware of the perspective, but he still loves you. He's still centered in his heart. So there's compassion, there's empathy, there's all these wonderful qualities of the heart that are universal. It's not about masculine or feminine. It's really about being in touch with your emotions and feelings and
totally.
And
so
soul.
That's the ultimate point, right?
I think that is looked at in society as being feminine, to be in touch with your heart. And that's what's misunderstood. A man can be in touch with his heart, and actually it makes him more masculine.
I see.
So because it's not really
Okay. Okay. I gotcha.
I don't know if that answers your question, but
no. I think it does. I mean, I think it's all like we're just looking at different theories through different lenses. And that's what's so beautiful about, the experience of being in a body on the planet, right? Is that we have this opportunity to put on different lenses and go, what do we think about that? What do we think about that? And that's really been Amy and I's goal with the Intentionists, is to bring different lenses and say, how do you like it with this red lens? How do you like it with the blue lens? How do you like it? And what resonates with you, and take what you want and leave the rest. So.
Well, I was just on that note of the whole masculine, feminine, because we discussed it a little bit more as a man versus woman, but these are roles that we can all play. Like you as a mother, you are the masculine role, for example, with your children. You're the conscious role. They have all this stuff going on, and you bring lucidity into their life. You bring awareness. So if you look at it, not just as man, woman, but just the masculine and feminine aspects of us,
the yin and the
yang, can manifest in different ways. Yeah. So it's really a couple relationship, obviously it's easier to say, okay, man, woman, masculine, feminine, but in different ways in our life, they manifest all the time. And if you're the CEO of a company as a woman, you do have a masculine role of providing a safe space for all of your employees.
Right.
You hold the space of that company, and you bring lucidity and awareness to everyone there, but you can do it through your heart.
I love that, Lela.
So there's a lot of ways that these energies can be manifested. It's just about kind of when you can know that, oh, that's my role in this relationship, it just makes life much more harmonious.
For sure. It helps to give you parameter of how to show up. It's like giving, it's like you said, it's giving it's the skeleton with the flesh and the bone and the muscle, and it's the full picture. So we're just about out of time. I wanted to wrap this up and ask you, how can people get in touch with you? First, she's got a book, Shopping Through Womanhood, An Intuitive Approach to Health, Beauty, and Shoes by Lela Weinert, and it's on Amazon, right? But how else can our listeners get in touch with you?
I have a blog and it's geared more towards women. It's called skinnyjeansandchocolate.com. So you can reach me on that. I'm also on Instagram. Lela Weinert is it Instagram handle? Is that what they call it?
Yes.
I feel so old with all this stuff.
WINERT at Lela Weinert on Instagram. Is that Facebook and as well Twitter?
Yeah,
or anything?
Facebook and Instagram. Yep.
Okay, great. And your email would be on skinnyjeansandchocolate.com. You probably have a contact form where people can reach you if they wanted to reach out. Okay, great. And any parting words? Lela, thank you for joining with me today. This has been a really interesting conversation. And I hope to have you back on in 6 to 9 months after your European experience. That was maybe my final question, was just like, what's next? I know we had this super exciting conversation a few days ago that I think might be fun for our listeners to hear.
Yeah, for me, I'll be spending some time in Europe. I will be continuing my studies in Tantra and my practice with yoga. And I really want to delve into connecting a lot of those principles to ballroom dance, because that's kind of where my heart is. I turned away from ballroom dance actually for some years, and that's why I had explored other things. And the more I've deepened my relationship with myself, every time I'm like, oh, I miss dancing. And now with this perspective from Tantra of polarity and of just how these energies harmonize, the masculine and feminine, it's something I really enjoy playing with. And now that I'm more conscious of those things, I think I can really help couples, even outside of the ballroom dance industry, with just fun workshops that really help to bring clarity to the roles in couple relationships and how much fun it can be to really be in your role. So
it's very cool. Yeah. I think it's exciting to rediscover passions. I know as a dancer myself, and having been basically a dormant dancer for the last 5 or 6 years, it's hard when your instrument of creativity is your body. And especially if you're like, I don't have a partner, how do I do this? So it's really neat. I'm excited that you're rediscovering that aspect. I think you'll have a lot of amazing things to offer that industry.
Once a dancer, always a dancer.
Yes, it's so true. It's so true. And what a beautiful marriage of those yogic principles in that other realm of ballroom. So thanks again. Thanks so much.
Before we part, we'd like to say thanks for listening, and we hope you'll connect with us on Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube. We would love to hear from you and appreciate all feedback, shares, and likes.
To learn more and subscribe to our newsletter, visit Intentionists.com. And no matter where you are or what you're creating, we send you love and invite you to breathe and begin.
See you next week.